I'm so excited to have, as per usual, another incredible guest. This one also happens to be a friend, a fellow freedom fighter, and a fellow fighter for truth and justice and the voiceless, which you know is right on theme with this community, the Facts, Law, Truth, Justice community, and everything we have been working so hard for the last several years. So I'd love to welcome AJ Hurley with the Right Rose Resistance. Again, friend, mentor, just role model and an ally in this fight for life. Hi, AJ. How are you? Thank you so much for being here.
What's going on, Nicole? Thanks so much for having me on. You are the best, man. I love working with you. You're one of my favorites, dude. You've been kind of by my side ever since day one back in 2020 when things started popping off. So I couldn't be happier to fight alongside you and so stoked to be on your show.
Well, actually, that's a really good point. I don't think a lot of people know how we met. We actually met because they've seen us at a lot of these rallies. We were up at the DuPont Clinic in downtown LA. We're in Fontana. And, but people don't know, like you just mentioned, that we met in 2020 when you were working at UCLA. I reached out to you through Instagram when I saw your video of you leaving, walking actually, why don't you tell people what you were doing?
Causing a little bit of a ruckus.
Yeah. It was amazing. It was amazing.
Yeah. Wow. It's been a long road since then, but yeah, I chose to not go quietly when stuff started popping off. And it's kind of wild how I feel like the whole landscape of just life has changed and the way people see their lives have changed. There's been obviously COVID was like such a horrible time, but at the same time, I have seen like having done activism work before and then having done activism work after, every single little in like circle of issues that people are fighting on have all become like one, and we've all gotten together, I think, marching in the same direction, whereas I didn't see this type of momentum before.
Right.
And so I think people are starting to wake up, and 2020 was a huge catalyst for that, realizing that, dude, if we don't start actively going out and risking it all, then we are not going to have anything left to risk.
Right.
So, so I was a respiratory therapist at UCLA. I put little babies on ventilators as a respiratory therapist, worked there for a little over 7 years, I think, before I was fired for not complying with the vaccine mandate requirements. Long story there, but they didn't give me any warning at all, and chose to make a public spectacle of me and Chris Rake. I don't know if you know, I think you do know Dr. Chris Rake, and another nurse. And yeah, so that was kind of the start of a lot of the friendships that along the way that kind of waged through the heat of battle, so to speak. But yeah, I chose to live stream them firing me. They could have like called me and told me that not to come to work or that I was being suspended. They went through halfway through my shift and then brought me in the office and ushered me out through the lunch hour with private security. And so it was pretty disgusting the way they did it, and kind of really paraded me through all of my colleagues through the lunch hour and made a public spectacle of me and me getting fired for not complying with their dictates. So that went viral, and then I got to know so many other people like yourself, and I was already doing work in that kind of pro-life space, defending children. Here I was putting babies on ventilators as a respiratory therapist at 21, 22, 23, 24 weeks gestation. And every day, these babies that should be in a womb became like a living, walking rebuke to me that their brothers and sisters, their kin, and even much older children are being violently dismembered and torn apart just because we say one baby is valuable and another baby is not. And so I, through my work of these little ones and putting their little hands on my fingers and me looking into their faces every day, I was like, I need to advocate for these children. And so 2020 when that popped off and the whole COVID thing, that was just a catalyst of one issue that I was already working among many others.
Yeah, and that's a big point. And actually, we were just discussing this before we came on the show, that and you hit the nail on the head. All of these issues, they're all concentric circles, and they all come down to this fundamental, like the value of life, and so again, AJ and I have known each other since 2020. We really reconnected, have been working very closely with respect to pro-life issues,
Children's
and
rights, in general.
Exactly. And so it was a tweet. We've been chasing each other down for maybe like 2 or 3 months, but a tweet that you posted, saying that abortion is the issue. And I reached out to him separately, and I think I made obviously a comment on your post, and then I reached out to you separately, and I said that I couldn't agree with you more. And we had this like full on debate, because I think that it's something that, especially in the conservative movement, we're seeing a lot of concessions. I mean, we just saw Donald Trump's position. He just took a formal statement, made a formal position statement on abortion. We saw Robert Kennedy Jr.'s position on abortion, and everyone is playing politics with this. Not just abortion. It's not abortion. It is of human life. And so when you can put parameters around when life starts, or when that life, springs into the context of being a valuable life worth protecting, if you can start again prescribing or putting characteristics or qualities or details around that life, then that allows it again people to be able to play politics with that, to make excuses in their personal lives. And so that's where the debate that we weren't debating, we were on the same page about it. Where AJ and I started talking again about this issue.
Yeah. So I think when we say abortion is the issue of our day, it's kind of like saying, and pardon I realize that there's probably people who are kind of take a moderate stance that are listening to this. So
Right.
bear with me.
Right.
It's akin in this sense. I'll qualify what I'm going to say, but it's akin to saying that, in Nazi or in the World War II, that the Holocaust of Jews was the issue, right? So there were other human rights and other people groups being eliminated, right? But and we don't mean that the Jews was the only people group, or that there wasn't foundational ideological or foundations that went into that. So, but what we mean is that was the catalyst, that was the defining era of that time. And so if you don't have at the fundamental principle the value of every single human being,
right,
then anything's possible. So when I say abortion is the issue, I mean, if we can't get life right, we are not going to get gender right. If we can't get, if we say you can be killed if, right, you are a human being, you are human and valuable if you are in a certain location, if you have a certain level of development, if you live in a certain environment, if you have a skin color. I mean, these are the same presuppositions that we've done to justify every single type of atrocity that's ever gone on. And so when I say abortion is the issue, it is the crux issue, because if we cannot get the right to life, if we can actually say being human is not enough, and there is not a single human rights violation that we can possibly come to consensus on, and anything is up for grabs. You ask the question, how in the world did we get to the place where we are transgendering young children. We're putting puberty blockers on 10, 11, 12, 13 year olds.
Mhm.
How is this happening? How did we get here? Well, because every single foundational principle by which life and liberty and the pursuit of virtue or happiness is possible has been eroded, and out through eugenics, through the destruction of the family, through the sexual revolution, through every single Marxist ideology. It's all connected, but the foundational principle is the principle of life, and that's
Mhm.
where we have to live and die.
So you explained it perfectly. I 100% agree with you. Again, this is why this interview came to fruition. And I have even explained to you that I have a very, I'm very pro-life, and I have a very specific stance on this issue. And I was not talking about it because I didn't want to alienate people.
Mm.
But again, so I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me if I'm wrong, but when we say abortion is the issue, it's not actually abortion, it's human life. Okay. So
Exactly.
it's that
Yeah.
human life, because when you allow them to train you to do the mental gymnastics, to be able to murder babies, again, like you said, at this stage or with this condition, or that live in this area, or that don't, I mean, we've seen even debates where people have said that parents who are, for example, criminals or drug addicts should be not only allowed to abort their babies, but incentivized or encouraged to abort their babies, because we wouldn't want a baby to be born in this kind of socioeconomic status or
Mhm.
this time. And obviously that's not ideal. But again, they are feeding you excuses,
Mhm.
justifications to allow you to, what I have called for a very long time, to go against your gut. I call it the gut check. It's not like some novel concept or idea, but in your heart that it's not right. But they have done, and you probably know, you do know better than me, for decades now, with Sanger starting with her, for decades now, to create all of these scenarios, these what if scenarios, these what if conditions, these what if characteristics or features, or to allow you to justify something that is otherwise completely unjustifiable. And again, it goes back to human life. So if you can come up with ways to kill the most innocent, the
Mhm.
most vulnerable human life, then you can do it in more egregious more quote unquote, what they might call obvious situations. And
Totally.
so, I totally agree with you. I don't want to like belabor the issue, but it is so important that we all need to be on the same page about that. Every single human life is important at the beginning stages, because otherwise they can trick us into creating scenarios that allow us to do what we have actively participated in, not just in the last 4 years with COVID, and now what you're saying with the transgenderism. And I might
Mhm.
even argue what's happening in Israel, and the Palestinian, what's happening in Gaza, and what happens in any war, Ukraine, and the Armenian genocide that's occurring right now. Like there are so
Mhm.
many situations where they have created societal constructs that allow you to be able to put it into a box, put those humans and those human
Yeah.
lives into boxes, and
Yep.
and come up with justifications in those parameters to allow what's happening, and to not rise up and say, no, that not on my watch, that's not going to happen here.
Yeah, well, most people, I think this is a salient point that a lot of people need to consider is, man, most people determine their morality based on moral intuitions,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
but we like all it takes is just to read human history, and
mm-hmm,
you can see that the moral intuitions of people can be unbelievably
mm-hmm,
wrong.
mm-hmm,
And so when you actually don't have a moral foundation, a philosophical, when you don't foundation that you actually can test and you can challenge and you can get to the nitty-gritty of and say, why do I believe that certain human beings are valuable? Because then you're left with just your moral intuitions. But
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
100 years ago, if we were having this conversation, how you felt about people of a certain particular skin color
mm-hmm,
was very indicative of how you might have felt toward right now
mm-hmm.
for human beings in a certain trimester.
Mhm.
And so just because your moral intuition based on culture, based
Mm.
on the friend group you have, based on this propaganda machine of of the media and everything, these are all hugely influenced. We're such a product of our environment.
Mhm.
It's so stinking important to realize that your intuition, your moral intuition towards a people group can be prejudice, can be wrong, and can be evil. And so if we don't challenge those and realize that, hey, every single human being is valuable, and just because a zygote doesn't look like something that I deem equally valuable and worthy of life,
Mhm.
doesn't mean it is. Because Jews in the Holocaust were put in ovens by people that had told themselves lies by the culture,
Mhm.
and their moral intuition didn't. I mean, did they know innately at some part it was wrong, or people that enslaved and black, people enslaved African American populations, they probably did, maybe they did,
Mhm.
but we had a whole culture whose moral intuitions were wrong and grossly inaccurate.
Well, I mean, literally, it's called they dehumanize them. So they make them
Yeah,
not human, right? So slaves, that's actually a really good point. Slaves were not seen as humans. They were seen as commodities that could be traded and sold.
yeah,
Arguably, and not arguably, but that's also what we're seeing with these fetuses, right? They are
mhm,
being, I think that people who are involved in the abortion industry, they
yeah,
clearly see them as commodities. They see them as opportunities to do research. They see them as,
totally.
even people who have the best intentions, who want to do research, who want to develop vaccines, who want to, grow a liver in a petri dish based
Mhm,
off of, the not the genetic makeup of some cells that from an aborted fetus, people
yeah,
who want to grow organs in order to save people who are on, the transplant list. Obviously, we've seen that dovetail into horrific organ and
fetal
blood
organ harvesting and yeah,
harvesting. And
yeah,
so obviously there's not obviously, but in some of these examples we see instances where it's sprung from potentially an altruistic idea that has gone awry. But to your point also about the Jews in the Holocaust, and also the gypsies, and also
yeah,
individuals with disabilities,
disabled, yeah,
the disabled,
absolutely,
they said that those people were not human, that they were gypsies, that they were magical, that they were this, that the Jews
yeah,
were filthy, that they carried disease. The same
yeah,
thing with disabled people. They dehumanize them to the extent that people were able to say these are actually not humans that are worthy of being, active participants in society. We actually do have to get rid of them. And I would also like to point out that this is not just from infants and from, like you were saying, zygotes and neonates. We're also talking, and we see it in our society, and I see it specifically, I'm Latin, and I see it in American culture. It is part of our culture to, at the furthest ends of the spectrum, whether it's the youngest and the most vulnerable there, also the oldest, where we
mhm,
are
yeah,
believe our
exactly,
elderly are disposable. I had
yep,
a conversation with a friend, and we went for a walk, and we hadn't seen each other for a while, and her in-laws, so her father-in-law, had a medical episode. And so she was talking to me about where they're talking about his, medical care and where they're going to put them. And have I ever thought about where I'm going to put my mom or
mhm,
my dad when they get to a certain advanced age? And it literally was foreign language to my ears. I was like, where would I put them? Like you put old, dishware in a box and you put it in storage.
yeah,
And
exactly,
she was like, oh, well, are you going to put them in a convalescent home? Or are you going to put them here? And I just realized she's, here, she's American, very American. And I was like, well, if something happened to my mom, then she would just move in with me. And when I
mhm,
stopped to think about it, that's not American society. And that's why I think we have seen such a rapid decline culturally in this country. I mean, I literally believe that this country is on fire, and it's because
mhm,
we don't value life. Again, whether
yep,
it's the youngest from the inception all the way to the end, we put them in places where we don't have to see them, where we are not bothered by them. We put them, she was like going to put them in the best home. And I was like, why would you do that? And she's like, well, it's the best home in our area. It's the best money can buy. And I'm like, you're just buying your conscience so that you don't feel bad that they're living in a convalescent home. And you've basically told them that they don't matter anymore. And it's because we have allowed, and I bring up that example because, again, like you said earlier, not to make anybody feel bad. People don't want to talk about abortion, AJ. I'm sorry.
No,
like this
they
is
don't.
People don't want to talk about it. Okay. So let's take something that people do talk about every day. They talk about where they're going to put their parents, how they're going to take care of their parents or their grandparents. And so I think that that's actually another example of the same idea that we're talking about here. And when you are able, again, to dehumanize humans, and put them places or dispose of them, then when you come to other scenarios, you can find out ways to dehumanize them, like you were just all those examples.
It's the slippery slope, right? So like if you say being human isn't enough, and that you say that in order to not be killed, in order to have the right to life that's inalienable, you must also be a human person, right? If you're making this category distinction between human and human and an actual person,
right?
Personhood is totally subjective. There's no scientific definition of personhood other than a social construct, right? You can't put personhood in a PT dish or look at it under a microscope, right? Are these subjective qualities that that one determines as to what quantifies the right to life and personhood. And so it's, if you allow for certain human beings to be killed in a gestational age or a level of development in the first trimester and the beginning of their life, well, then what is going to keep you from allowing them to be killed later in life? So if consciousness or self-awareness, by the way, self-awareness doesn't happen till several months after birth, by the way, but these are the same foundational like presuppositions that are used to justify offing. I mean, you're seeing it in Canada, they call it MAID, is another word for euthanasia. It's a leading cause of death now in Canada. I can't remember what rank it is, but a leading cause of death now in Canada is assisted suicide or euthanasia. They call it medical aid in dying because they have to dress it up with a euphemism, just like calling abortion or I mean, really, abortion is a euphemism. It's instead of dismemberment or poisoning a human being in
murder.
Or murder. Yeah, exactly. And so
the difference is with the murder, abortion and murder. And I think we need to talk about that. And you and I have talked about this, and MAID is a euphemism for the assisted euthanasia.
The murder of old people.
Well, because, and also they're allegedly, right, or arguably, they are consenting to that, right? They are active participants and they are making the decision. So you don't murder yourself, right? So that's actually suicide. It's a physician assisted suicide.
Self-murder, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, self-murder. And then, but with the fetuses, it is murder. And I would like to read, the penal code. I like to read it. Penal code section 187. You guys have heard that, 187. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being or a fetus. This is not me being a conspiracy theorist. It's not AJ. We're not being salacious. California Penal Code Section 187. Murder is the unlawful killing of a human being or a fetus with malice aforethought, meaning aforethought. You contemplate it and you plan it and you do it. People don't want to understand. And this is a big debate that actually AJ and I, if I may be so bold, have been having with others in this movement, is it's murder. So we're going to call it murder. And if you want to carve out explanations or attempt to justify murder as defined by the penal code, not as defined by me or Facts, Law, Truth, Justice or AJ or the White Rose Resistance, that's the penal code. So get on board with this. This is the truth. And then you can try and justify, and I'll, just to read, then they make exceptions. to murdering a fetus.
Exactly.
And abortion,
Exactly.
if it's with involving, and then they have all these references to the health and safety code, and those are describing abortion. If it's a physician assisted, like physician assisted suicide, or it's a physician assisted murder of a baby, then it's acceptable. It's an exception to murder. It's not an exemption, which is a nuance I won't get into. It is a murder. That's not me. That's what the penal code says. But then they've done these loopholes to not require the legal system to press charges against you for murdering your fetus with planning and preparation or malice aforethought. Then they accept it so that they don't have to prosecute you. But if a mom murders her fetus because she just hates the fetus, or the dad gives the mom a drug to cause the mom to have a miscarriage, to kill the fetus, they will get pressed. Those two individuals will get charged and with murder. But if a mom does it because she wants an abortion and she goes to a medical provider and she calls it an abortion, then it's okay and you can't press charges. So people need to understand, this is not like, we're not inventing this. Even the law recognizes it. It just allows for these exceptions. They've created exceptions or loopholes so that where you can murder your fetus, but you won't get charged with murder.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's actually several states that have statutes like this. Arizona is one of them. That it's actually illegal to kill an unborn child with malice aforethought. But there's other laws that have been put in place that make exceptions for a certain class of human beings if their mother wants to willfully take their life. And so, like me putting a little baby on a ventilator. A mom comes to me, she goes into premature labor, and I put their 21 or 22 week, 24 week fetus baby, whatever euphemism or however you want to call it, on a ventilator, and we put millions of dollars into them and save their life. That baby is valuable because she said it is.
Right.
But if she wanted now in California at 38 weeks to go and pay, the DuPont clinic or some other late term abortion facility to go and dismember their child, that's precisely what would have happened. So this woman, two different circumstances, this baby, two different circumstances. One is value because we say it is, and the other one is, so it's not any qualifying factor that makes it more human. It's not any factor that this baby can't even live outside of the womb. This is happening, right? And people say it's a small number of late-term abortions that take place, but it's 1 million abortions a year, 1 or 2%. Do the math. 10 to 20,000 late-term abortions and that's that we know of, right?
Well,
so
yeah, exactly.
There's no federal reporting laws on abortion, by the way. So we actually really don't even know how many abortions are taking place.
I was going to say that. And I actually just read in prepping that it's 1 in 5 children are aborted. That's huge. 1 in 5 children is massive. And like you said, but we don't even know what the real number is. You said something really interesting, and I don't know if it was intentional or if it was like a slip, but you said, I'll put the 23-week fetus on a ventilator. And I think that is so telling, because if that baby was in this womb, it's a fetus. But when that baby is out of the womb, like you said, you consider it a baby, a newborn baby, and you do everything that you can to save it. So it's almost even a perverse incentive, or not a perverse incentive, but allows medical providers or moms, women who are pregnant with children, to keep them in as long as possible and then be able to terminate them, murder them at any point, as long as they keep the baby inside. That's really, it's such a interesting, or not interesting, I don't like to say interesting in this context, but it is, I guess, just a nuance that is so telling. It's so telling how he who controls the language controls the masses. So if you can get people to pretend for as long as possible, as long as that baby is inside, it's a fetus, And a fetus is not a person, it's not a human being. Let's just go back to human being, like that basic, because we talk about, I'm a human and civil rights law firm, and an advocacy group. We're talking about human rights, basic human rights. If you can get people to lie to themselves, again, that Jews are not human, that the disabled individuals are not human, that these fetuses are not human and they can be murdered, then people are like, okay, they're not human. And that is so important. That is so important. And that's why this issue is so important.
Yeah. So we're seeing that with the GOP right now. I mean, it's with every, and it's highlighted with the whole IVF thing. It's highlighted with Trump and his political maneuvering to try to stay in office, to try to get reelected. Is he's, putting his finger up to where the wind's blowing and seeing, how he can get the most votes and stay elected. And that's where he's going to end up working and choosing. And what I trust Trump enough to know that he's not lying when he says he's not interested in actually doing anything for the.
You mean leaving it to the states? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Well, not only
like
that,
federal...
but like, yeah, I mean, so it's just problematic, right? Because look, I didn't like a 15-week ban. I thought that was horrendous. And I think he was actually good for stepping away from that because it's going to get everybody to hate him. Like I look at that as a pro-lifer and I'm like, dude, that's freaking weak, man. You can feel, a baby can feel pain at 12 weeks. That's like scientifically proven.
How did they prove that? Just they watched the brain activity.
There's a study that came out that debunked a lot of the previous knowledge on that. It's called Reconsidering Fetal Pain, and they used to think that you needed like a neural cortex, I think is what it is, in order to have pain sensation. But they basically debunked that and saying that we know by a week 12 that a baby can feel pain. And so, that's pretty early. And and really in Europe, you can't, there's some exceptions, but in general, you can't get an abortion past 12 weeks in all of Europe. And America has some of the most extreme abortion laws in the entire world. So I look at that whole thing that he originally said, like, 15. I like 15. It's or was it 16? It's a round number or something 16. Like that. It's like, and so the pro-choice people are going to look at him and say, this is crazy because we're pro-choice and we want to kill babies. Basically, we want reproductive justice. And then the pro-lifers are going to look at him and say, dude, that's totally weak sauce. And so I think he's right to back away from that. But think of what we're saying, sending it back to the states.
Yeah, we haven't made any he just is sidestepping the issue. Before he said the 16 weeks, he had said the 16 weeks. So if people know, they follow us and they've been watching our work. There are federal laws that apply equally to all the states, and then there's certain and those are very, very few and far between. Truly, the federal government should be very small, with very small enumerated or listed powers. So they can't issue federal laws on things that are supposed to be handled by the states. Arguably, I mean, I do believe that it's a state issue, and that was with the overturning of the decision. It should be a state issue because it has to do.
You think this abortion should be a state issue?
I do not think that the federal government has authority to make laws that affect all of the states. No, I don't think that this is within the enumerated powers of the federal government. The federal government's powers there's like 8. It's to coin money or print money. It's to run the U.S. postal system. It's to declare war, right? We couldn't have California going to war with France and not New York and Florida. All of us have to go. It's to train up and to have like the standing militia, the Navy, the Army. It's very, very, it's truly issues that require collaboration across all the states. We couldn't have, again, California printing money and then Arizona not printing money. Like, we're all printing money, and we're all distributing the money. The same with the mails. So it's it's all truly only national issues, and the federal government is supposed to be very, very small, and it's supposed to be controlled by the states, and the states are arguably supposed to be controlled by the people that live there, their constituents. So I agree, and that's what Donald Trump did, even with COVID, through a majority of his presidency. And like, I think he's completely obnoxious. But I think that he hit the nail on the head on a lot of issues, and people were upset about it because it does create disparities. For example, in COVID, he was like, in terms of like ventilators and getting people or getting different states resources, there are some states that have better budgets that were able to pull and buy and have access to more COVID resources than other states. But again, that's not a federal issue. That was a state issue. In the 10th Amendment police power, you have to be, what's going on in your state. You have to be prepared. If you are a state that doesn't balance its budget and cannot get access and purchase up all the ventilators you need, knowing the demographics, knowing the comorbidities of your constituents, that's your problem. I mean, it's a cruel way to think, but if you think about it, you're asking me if his analysis is appropriate. I think it's an appropriate analysis in terms of federalism. But again, so I agree.
My retort, if I can,
ahead.
to that would just be, the Declaration of Independence says we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? That all men are endowed by their creator with inalienable rights, among whom is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so the states created the federal government and in turn the Constitution to limit the power of the federal government. But that the presupposition of that was that we all agreed that life, that no state can determine who lives or dies by a vote.
Totally separate issue. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And so the 14th Amendment, right, talks about no person should be deprived of life or liberty without due process of law. And so if an unborn child is scientifically a human being, and there's no ontological distinction between a child in the womb and outside of the womb. Well, you made it through the 6-inch birth canal. Congratulations, you're a person now, and you have 14th Amendment rights. It's totally so. I think so. The Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade was this Supreme Court decision that hamstrung the states, so to speak, by saying that you couldn't protect a child prior to viability standard, which is a nebulous standard. But what the Dobbs decision said wasn't that we should return this to the states, but it said that the issue of determining that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion, that a decision to regulate abortion has been returned to the states and their, to the people, not the states, to the people and their elected representatives. And so my contention is that if an unborn child is a human being, it's a person, and therefore they should have personhood rights protected on the 14th Amendment.
Which is what you and I have been saying and why this conversation is even happening. So yeah, I completely agree. So it shouldn't be about regulating abortion or not regulating abortion. Exactly. It should actually, and which is, I mean, this is again why the language matters, because, and I do want to put it in the context of COVID, for example, because we don't necessarily have to, but we're allowing them to, it's again, what we've already said, they are controlling the narrative, right? It's about depriving women's rights and and their right to control their body, XYZ. But if we take it back and we take control back of the language, of the Constitution, of the laws that are in the books, it's exactly what, if we returned to that and stopped playing in their playground, on their, in their stadium, on their fields, we shouldn't even be having a debate about abortion and at what trimester or what week or under what conditions. We shouldn't even be over there. We need to be here, which is human life starts at conception. We have to have a bright line, a clear delineating mark, and it has to be at conception, because then we don't, like you said earlier, the slippery slope. We aren't. So let's just have a bright line. This is where it starts, as acknowledged in the penal code, as acknowledged in the Constitution and in the Supreme Court precedent. This is where it starts. And if in California, murder is the killing of a human being or a fetus with malice aforethought, which is interesting that they do make the distinction between human being and fetus, right? So they're in the law, they're saying that it's a fetus, but they are recognizing that even killing a fetus with malice aforethought is murder. Then we need to be talking about murder. We don't need to be talking about, and I'm a woman and I've had children, and we'll get into that in another time, but I have 3 children, but we aren't talking about this over here. We're not talking about women's rights, and we're not talking about healthcare. We're talking about murder. So we need to take control of the language. And if you asked Donald Trump or Bobby Kennedy Jr., and you asked them, what are your thoughts on banning murder of fetuses or unborn human beings, that would change the narrative. That would change the conversation. And that's what we need to do. We need to take back control of the language and of reality, because that's why they have us spinning in circles over here when really we should be over here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Well, okay. So then, who are the leaders? I mean, are there any political, where do you see like a glimmer of hope? Like, where can we go from
the glimmer
here?
of hope is the fact that the church is waking up. So like, this is where I think, rather than looking at politicians, which is important.
That's why I stopped. But I stopped. I was because
exactly.
the big theme with us is that we have the power, we have the authority to be not only controlling our own lives and how we conduct ourselves and in our families and our communities and et cetera, but we have so much more power. So I don't want to talk about presidential candidates actually, because I'm not relying on that system. I'm not relying on them actually following through on what they say they're going to do. Certainly the ones that are going to take a hard line on this are not even going to get elected. So totally. Sorry to interrupt you, but go ahead.
No. I think, honestly, what gives me hope is what you are able to do right now. Like, with the stuff that you're doing in the state level with these ballot initiatives, for instance, there is, the church is waking up. And we can get into what the church means or whatever, because people have different opinions on what even that is. But I'm just seeing an overwhelming groundswell, a grassroots movement of people that are actually waking up and getting involved and they're stopping, their apathy. So that's what gives me hope. Social media.
Have you seen that directly correlated? I've personally seen it. I know that my position, I have made the active decision, and I've actually been very hard on myself for not speaking out about abortion or murdering human lives before. And I'm not going to be silent about it anymore for all the reasons that you and I discussed. I know that happened within me, that it was like, I saw COVID happen, and then I saw the transgender thing happen. And I'm just saying, they don't care about children. They don't care about life. They don't care about humans. And so it has been a natural progression to return to my feelings about abortion, but then to understand that that's why it's important to speak out about it now. Do you see that same correlate or that same kind of like path happening in people that you're working with now? Is that like a natural progression? Are there more people
I'm
like
seeing
me?
Unbelievable explosion of like a groundswell of people getting involved and people being activated and people honestly just getting mad. Dudes need to get mad. It's like we've been silenced for so long. You go to churches and it's just filled with women because dudes don't relate at all. Guys have no understanding of where they belong in this whole godly type of church thing, have relationship with God, and it's become a very touchy feely kind of sensitive. Let's talk about our feelings and let's get on our knees and cry. And guys just don't have, they don't understand. They understand fight evil. They understand, and the bad guys. They understand getting involved in actually using their strength to confront injustice. God's made us to be defenders. God's made us to be protectors. God's made us to be providers, and to take care of the vulnerable, the weak, the defenseless. And that's why I got into this. Was these little children were grasping onto my little pinky, and I was like, they have no one helping them. They have no men. They're the most, like James talks about, who's the fatherless, the orphan, the widow. Those were the people in that day that were most defenseless, most at risk of being taken advantage of. And who is more fatherless now than the unborn child? Who is more fatherless than the child in the womb that is going, his mother is taking him inside the doors of this death camp to be either chemically starved to death by an abortion pill or to be literally dismembered limb from limb, who is without protection in the world and the fatherless. There's no one more orphaned or fatherless than the unborn child. And if there's an issue that dudes can get involved with that would animate them and that actually would cause their blood to boil against the injustice, and spur them on towards masculine kind of force and vitality and selfless, abandonment, it would be the issue of life and children's rights, because children are the most defenseless, the most need for help, and they are being attacked everywhere. Everywhere.
I know. Very, like you mentioned earlier, through our work, right? It has become incredibly painfully obvious that they're coming after the kids, and it's
demonic effort. And that's why I say that's like, it needs to be like the church, because dude, this is not like a political thing, right? This isn't not some politicking issue that we can just, hey, let's sit in a country club and talk about policy. This is evil. This is like, people know that. I talk to so many kids on college campuses that are frankly just lost. They're so controlled by either demons or just leftist kind of ideologues that have poisoned their minds with this woke mind virus, that they look me in the face, they know it's murdering a child, and they just don't care. And
that is demonic, by the way.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do to fix that other than a spiritual revival. God needs to get a hold of these people's hearts. And so that's something that the church can only do.
When you say church, you just mentioned it. We don't even know what that means. Different things for different people. I'm Catholic, and so we are very pro-life, anti-murdering babies. Obviously, with this Pope in place, things have changed. Things that were just traditionally and just always true are now up for debate, I guess. And then pivoting position again. And he did again during COVID say, oh, well, aborted fetal cells for vaccines. He was okay with that. Where traditionally and historically that has never been a position of the Catholic Church.
Totally.
So in the Christian churches, is it up for debate? We're still Christian, right? We're both Christian. So is that or is it simply that the church, there's some churches that don't speak out about it, or are they actually making concessions around abortion?
So I can speak for the Protestant church, evangelicalism more specifically, because that's what I grew up with. I think there's a theological term called pietism. that has really taken root the last 100 years or so, a little bit more than that, but it's kind of gone to seed and gone to fruit, I guess, within the last 100 years. But pietism is this understanding that this earth is not our home, that salvation is personal, that God's relationship with mankind is personal, it's private, it's subjective, it's something that it's your own relationship with God, and therefore it doesn't affect really. Our home is heaven, and so God isn't concerned as much with earthly things. And so there's been things, this doesn't always apply, but some people have said, okay, we're going to get raptured out of here, it's going to get really bad, therefore the quicker that it all goes to, frankly, to crap,
to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, exactly. The sooner we get out of here and get raptured out of it. So you'll hear phrases, I heard phrases growing up like, culture building, culture warfare is like arranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, or it's like, why polish the brass on a sinking ship? These type of, it was driven by an eschatological or future end times particular type of belief. But the other side, I think that's more prevalent, is just this easy believism gospel, the seeker friendly movement that's been the church model. Almost every single evangelical church is all geared towards unbelievers. The Sunday event is not an event for you as a Christian to build you up and make you strong and disciple you as a warrior in the kingdom of God. It's actually an evangelistic event that your pastor engages, where you bring unbelievers into the church, give them this enough of the truth of God's word that the spirit of the age would allow. And so that they accept this prayer, and then hopefully in 10 or 15 years, we can feed them more and more biblical truth as to not offend them along the way. And hopefully
so it's to attract new congregants, new
followers. Yeah. To get
it's
them to say this prayer, to walk an aisle, and to accept, accept quote unquote Jesus in your heart, which is nowhere in the Bible. And rather than what Jesus says,
that's so interesting.
The rich young ruler comes to Jesus and he says, what do I need to do to inherit the kingdom of God? He looked right into the idols of his heart, which was money. And he says, go sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me. He walks away. He doesn't say to him, well, just accept me, pray this prayer, ask me in your heart, and then, begin this long process by which you can slowly, by little, he says, come and die. Jesus says, if you want to be my disciple, you need to take up your cross and follow me. And if anyone isn't willing to take up his cross and follow me, he isn't worthy of me. And this used to be the message of Christians. This used to be we used to be the salt of the earth. We used to be the light of the world. Those days are long gone. We are basically like St. Augustine used to say, if you, let me try to remember the quote. If you take what you like about the gospel and you reject what you dislike, what you're worshiping is not God, but yourself. And that's what we've crafted our churches to become. And 100 years later, we've woken up to a culture that has been completely given over to the left, given over to Marxists, to people who hate us. And our children now don't belong to us. 3,000 babies are being murdered a day. And
that we know of. Right.
Yeah. And you name every type of debauchery that's happening, all our institutions have been given over.
And why do you mentioned 100 years ago? What is that like a specific moment in time that something was
Well,
there
I
a
mean, it
transition?
kind of started with Charles Finney and the revival kind of movement where, and there was a great intention behind it.
Right.
We were all about evangelism. We were all about getting the gospel out and the Great Awakening. But you started to see the Great Awakening that guys like Jonathan Edwards preached. He preached a sermon called "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," where he gave people the righteous requirements of God, and he said, "This is the sin that you need to repent of." Like, God is holding you in derision. You're his enemy unless you come to him and repent and believe in Christ. And that message slowly became more of easy believism, and it became a market driven thing of getting people into the church and filling seats and keeping people in the pews and keeping the lights on. And it's now just kind of an easy believism, social gospel kind of club of not social gospel, but I guess you could say that depending on how you define it, but an easy believism type of a club of people that accept what they want, have a feel good kind of psychological driven self-help message that makes them feel good about themselves, and then they go home.
So you think though, within the last couple of years that the church has started to see that they can't be silent on these issues anymore? I feel horrible because I feel like my church has done the opposite. They were silent in COVID. They were complicit in COVID. They condoned tacitly and outwardly. They condoned, like I said, the exceptions to abortion, exceptions to alienating and discriminating against people, all of the things they shut down, they would not open back up. I had to leave my church that I was attending and had a big falling out with them about, you're supposed to be the beacon of hope and to be the bedrock and that rock in the storm. And you are not doing that for people who need you most right now. So we had a lot of regression in the Catholic Church. But you're saying that in the Christian churches, you're seeing the opposite happening. Because I mean, we see Rob McCoy, we see Jack Hiz, we see Pastor John Randall at Calvary South OC. Like, we see a lot of them now, Rick Brown standing up to COVID mandates and to that. And I have seen them help us with these human rights and parental rights and then child, human rights issues. So it's the opposite is happening in your neck of the woods.
That's the irony is, there's a great restructuring happening a lot of these churches that stood up. They lost all the bad people and then they found all the good ones. And so I think there is, if you're going to look at it like a market strategy, there is a market for freedom. There is a market for having a pastor finally with balls, like having courage and dudes who actually aren't pussies.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Sorry about my French. I mean, but this is like the other thing. It's like the guys, they just don't have a place because we've been so feminized.
Well, I mean, it's both physical by the foods that we eat, by the water that we drink, that the things that they spray on us. And it's also been social. I mean, the feminist women's lib movement, whatever you even want to call that. I mean, we have literally browbeat masculinity out of men. If you are masculine and you want to protect a woman and you want to pay for the bill and you want to we've even turned opening door into like a personal affront. Then you are literally full of, or you're oozing toxic masculinity. I mean, even that term toxic masculinity, I don't even know what's not toxic. I mean, you only ever hear nowadays toxic masculinity. I asked in like Twitter, in like a Twitter fight, okay, so what is there like a non-toxic? Is there just like an entry? Like, is there like a basic masculinity that you will get behind? And there isn't. There's either toxic masculinity or you're not, or a complete emasculation, which is why. And that was part of the whole agenda, right? That was, in my opinion, birth control, women's liberation, sexual revolution, all
Yep.
of this. You can do whatever you want as a woman. You can have whatever job you want. You can have sex with whoever you want. You can have babies with whoever you want, or with people that you don't want, which like alone, IVF, or no baby at all, abortion. You can, all of these things. And any man that is trying to stand in your way of that is toxic and is trying to oppress you. And we need to get rid of those men. And so, I mean, the beta males, right? You call them the beta males. And we're just
there's a way to, like, I guess, explain this phenomenon. That's been happening in the church. Honestly, it's speaking for the Protestant church, it's kind of been like an indictment. 2021 and the churches that did rise up, it's kind of an indictment on them, to be honest with you, for some of them at least. I mean, Jack Hibbs and Rob McCoy are probably exceptions to the rule there, because they've been talking about this stuff forever and they've been standing up forever, long before COVID. But, you know, for a lot of people, a lot of these churches, a lot of these pastors, I'm sorry, but it took them coming after your church and it finally affecting you for you to stand up and be a man. Like, where were you on these issues like your whole ministry? Like, where were you your whole entire like public ministry on these issues? Like, why have you not been a voice for the voiceless? Why have you not been speaking out? Like I went to this church. I mean, I won't name it. I was going to, but I won't. But you know, it was Black Lives Matter. They were all talking about systemic racism and all the stuff. There was all these woke platitudes and political movements that they were preaching against, or preaching about from the pulpit. You'll talk about racism, but you won't talk about every other injustice.
It's wild to me. I mean, again, coming from my background, I did not know that churches, and actually, as I say that, I'm lying, because I am aware of friends that who were upset with a pastor who would not take a hard stance on abortion. And I thought it was just that one pastor at a Christian church. But now that I have this conversation with you, I'm like really rocked that as Christians, that this was, but that just proves the point that this is so important that we talk about this, because if you can even get Christian church leaders to take a back seat and to not want to talk about it, or worse yet, not even know what their position is on this, we are in dire straits. It is actually worse than I thought, which is why we need to talk about this.
A way for people to like understand this is, I'm trying to think of a way that people can kind of create categories in their head. So God created 3 institutions that are supposed to run the world. The church, the family, and the state. Okay. And the state. So the state, their role is to provide a justice system, a legal system, and a national defense, right? The family, your role, there's government and family, and then there's the church. And so many pastors didn't stand up and start speaking out against the evil in society until it started affecting their sphere of authority. Right. And so, like, I love John MacArthur. I went to his college. He's amazing. But he didn't wake up, to be honest with you. He was always the one completely punting any political issue and our engagement. A lot of this pietistic statements, and this goes a long way. We can do a whole podcast on that.
We probably will.
But he really didn't come out against all the evil and speaking out against it from a political perspective and telling churches or Christians to resist the government until it started affecting his church. And so the issue that you need to realize is God is over all of it, right? God isn't just over this little sphere of the church. He's over the sphere of family. He's over the sphere of government. And you don't recognize his lordship over
Mhm.
everything, and you
Mhm.
don't look to him
Mhm.
as how we run every single one of these institutions,
Mhm.
you are going to set yourself up for the greatest amount of injustice that's ever
Mhm.
going to happen, because we are getting away from the biblical foundation that this entire country is built on.
Ye- Yeah. Well, I have two things to say to that. One is there's been this distortion or contortion, again, the mental gymnastics of separation of church and state. I think it's really laughable when people say that this is not a Christian nation. It wasn't based on Christian, ideals,
Mhm.
because of that one concept, that one principle, that separation of church and state. The separation of church and state is that we did not want a church that was run by the monarchy. That was
Yeah,
the only, it actually was
absolutely.
controlling the
Yeah.
language. It was to prevent that from happening. It
Yeah.
wasn't to tell the churches that they couldn't participate or have opinions on state issues, because like you said, there actually is no church and state. We just didn't want the church to be run by the state.
Yeah,
So there's that.
exactly.
But what about people who aren't Christian? What about people who are either agnostic or atheists, or who aren't, again, like how do they get involved?
Well, I mean, like, I'll work with anybody to end abortion,
Right.
right? So you don't have
Right.
to be a Christian to end abortion.
Right.
Um, but at a certain level, you're gonna I think you're gonna have to ask. I mean, so here's the way, one way I can answer that is like,
Hmm.
at a certain level,
Hmm.
like I held mangled third trimester aborted
Hmm.
babies.
Hmm.
And
And this justice for the five,
there's
so people
yeah, so
know, in DC.
there's just no way to look at a baby that's been brutally treated that way and not realize that this is utterly demonic.
Hmm.
And so, look, I'll take anybody to end that wants to help me end child killing,
Hmm.
from a political perspective,
Hmm.
but buckle up along the way,
Hmm.
because you're going to realize that this issue isn't like any other issue.
Hmm.
Um, Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven belongs to little babies, little
Hmm.
children,
Hmm.
and abortion is a full frontal assault on the
Hmm.
kingdom of God,
Hmm.
because children belong the kingdom.
Hmm.
And so I don't know personally how you can get involved with and see the supernatural type of an evil and not realize that there's demonic realm behind it.
Well, I will tell you that, again, with especially in the last couple of years during COVID, with what happened with me and the church, that I was going very, I wouldn't far from I was going far from the church. I mean, I didn't have a church. I didn't even know where to
Yeah.
go. And everything that they were doing was antithetical to anything I'd ever learned. And I couldn't even go if I wanted to, because I'm like, this is not even this doesn't represent anything that we stand for or we believe in. And so, but I will say, when you see these things that what you're mentioning, when you see adults, um, putting children on the sacrificial altar of science and equity and compassion, right? This was,
Mhm.
again, manipulation of language. And you see there's no other explanation than, again, the murdering, the dismembering, the sterilization, the mutilation. Am I talking about abortion? Am I talking about gender affirming healthcare? Am I talking
Yeah,
about
right.
COVID? Am I talking about forcing parents or convincing parents that they need
Mhm.
to enroll their children in clinical trials of a never before experimented or used in human beings
Mhm.
injection?
Yep.
What am I talking about? I don't know. It's all the same.
It's all
So
wrapped up together.
it's all
Absolutely.
wrapped up together. And so I hope, you know, it's not a religious, it isn't even, it is, right? Okay. So it is, in my opinion, when you see these parents and these adults talking about children the way that they do, whether it's for money or for, all of the reasons that it can be, they're to me, it is demonic. It is the modern day. You and Seth talk about it all the time. It's the modern day sacrificing to the Moloch, on the gilded altars, throwing them in the fires. Again, and they're doing it because they think that they have to do it. It's no different than it was then. They're like, you must throw your babies into the fire for the betterment of society. You must inject them with this mRNA technology that's never been tested before in humans, that killed all of the ferrets in the experiments. They like literally just imploded. Their immune systems just ate them alive from the inside out. You must do this for the betterment of society. You must sacrifice your child. You must sacrifice your child to this transgender, because they've convinced parents that you have to kill your baby because you could never provide your baby with a safe, loving, supportive home. You are a single mom. You are uneducated. You don't have the financial resources. No one will love you. You'll have to sacrifice your career. So to me, when you look at all of this, it's all, again, spiraled into this same realization that this is satanic. It is demonic. And when you see this full frontal attack on children who are the most vulnerable, regardless of whether you're Christian or not, you have to know that it's evil.
And so real quick on that. So it doesn't have to be a religious issue, but on another front, like foundationally, it has to be a religious issue. And what I mean by that is, science can tell you when life begins, but it can't tell you why life is valuable. And so if you don't value human life as a society, or if you think that certain human beings can be killed just because we determined societally that that's okay, then it becomes a religious issue. It becomes a foundational philosophical issue that underpins morality. And so that's why it becomes a religious issue. And that's why I think that it has to be a Christian issue. It has to be a religious issue, because the only foundation, you have to have an objective foundation for why it's always wrong to kill human beings, and why it's always wrong to kill every single type of human being. If you lose that, all you have is might equals right, and society determines morality.
Okay, so morality, your position is that morality can only be based in religion,
objectively based on an objective lawgiver. So like you really only have two.
It's hard to have this debate because to interrupt you, because I'm literally writing as you are saying this. Okay, because our laws were based again on these Christian principles. People want to pretend that this is not a Christian country. It is. So we can't even parse out laws from morality, just personal, values and principles, because even our laws are based in this Christian foundation. So we don't even have, in our culture, in our society, in our American society, we don't even have an objective that's not based in Christianity and these religious philosophical principles. But what I was thinking was, is there anything that I can think of right now that guides my morals or my ethics other than what I learned growing up Catholic in the Catholic Church? Is there anything that I believe or feel that isn't at its root based in that? So that's what I was thinking. That's what.
Like there's no neutrality. No one's a blank slate. Everyone has biases and consciences that have been determined and influenced by their environment, their culture, and their upbringing. And so when you study the history of humanity, child sacrifice, and not just unborn children, born children, has been the status quo. It has existed prolifically in every single culture that's ever existed. It's, if you don't believe me on this, just read The Third Time Around by George Grant. But from the Canaanites to the Egyptians to the Persians to like every single from antiquity and prior. I mean, we have examples of child sacrifice going back tens of thousands of years, and that was not a problem, by anybody. And so, at a certain foundation, it becomes an ideological issue of a philosophical one. Like, is it okay to kill human beings? And you either have two worldviews. Like, one, you have a lawgiver that by which you can actually know and obtain objective morality, that we have a law that's written in stone that says it's never okay to do X, Y, Z, right? We have 10 commandments, the governing principles. Or there is no guiding ethos, there's no guiding principle, and all we have is, like, think about the atheistic presupposition, right? We came from matter, and unguided processes of matter in motion give rise to uniformity, and then morality is a combination of groups of people deciding on a code. So, people in Papua New Guinea decide what's best for them. That was a culture, and our society determines what's best for us. But if there is no guiding principle above society, then society is the guiding principle. And so it's just simple as that. And so that's why I say, if you have enough people in a culture that think child killing is okay, well, then who's to tell them wrong if you don't have an objective lawgiver that comes from outside of society? I've never heard an answer around that.
No, I totally, I hear what you're saying. I totally agree with you. I just had never thought of, you think that, as a lawyer, you think that these things are just laws and they're put there and they're brought by a committee. We now know I know the legislative process. I'm sure you know it, very familiar with it as well. So there's this whole process, but again, at its very root, it is exactly what you were just describing. In all, we've talked about decades, centuries worth of history and information. Who is your hero?
Hero. Besides Christ, obviously,
Right.
I would say, heroes that are alive right now. It's like some of my mentors, Randall Terry, Jeff White, my gosh, I'm blanking on her name. The girl who has been arrested tons of times for saving babies. Joan Andrews Bell. These are some of my earthly heroes, people that are risking decades in federal prison for standing upon the reality that unborn children are human beings and they deserve dignity and protection. And they risk their lives, risk their lives for them. I guess those are some of my earthly heroes. Historically, man, that's a good question. C.S. Lewis, some of my influencers would be guys like R.J. Rushdoony, Greg Bonson. These are some people that come to mind off the top of my head.
Well, you just mentioned, those. I'm blanking on what kind of how we're calling them, but those individuals that were peacefully protesting, I think even silently protesting at some point, and then they were indicted under Joe Biden's FACE law, that federal law about obstructing a woman's right to access an abortion clinic.
Yep.
horrifying. I think one of them was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for this. Is it
Yep.
Joanne?
She hasn't been sentenced to that yet. They're
Mhm.
sentencing, but they're all facing like 11 years in prison.
And
Yeah.
you guys, when you went to Vegas and you were trying to raise money for a woman that was considering an abortion, with the Spider-Man, I forgot his name, what they
Yeah. Yeah.
call him.
Mason.
Yes, and you guys were just arrested also yourselves. When things like this happen, um, does this ever? I mean, that's scary. 12 years, 11 years in a federal prison for
Yeah.
silently protesting.
Yep.
Is this
For
a
peaceful,
discussion?
nonviolent protest. Yep.
100%. Is this a conversation that people are having in the pro-life, anti-murder
Well,
movement?
it's unprecedented what they're doing because,
Mhm,
so the FACE Act, which for people who don't understand, like FACE or don't know, is it still stands for Freedom to Access Clinic Entrances.
mhm,
So it's the only type of non-violent type of trespass
mhm,
which will make you a felon. So you can block you can refuse to leave a and block the door of a UPS or something like that, or like a grocery store, and you get a slap on the wrist and a day in jail.
mhm,
Um, but if you do that instead of at a grocery store or a convenience store, you do that at an abortion clinic, you can face up to 11 years in federal prison, just for doing the same thing. So the FACE Act carries with it a 1-year sentence, but they're using federal conspiracy statutes attached to it, which were originally designed for the KKK. Um, and it's unprecedented. The Biden administration is the first administration to ever use um, this conspiracy statute against a peaceful, nonviolent person. And so it's just
mhm.
crazy. I mean, one of the ladies that got charged with this face violation
Mhm.
is like a 90-year-old
Right.
Holocaust survivor.
Mhm.
Her name is Eva Edel. She's also a total hero too. But
Mhm.
these people are just they're actually putting faith to practice. They're
Mhm.
actually acting like what they say abortion is really what it is. Like if abortion is truly murder, in fact you're truly killing a human being, like we should act like it. And so they're laying down their lives and their freedom for and peacefully putting themselves um in front of people that would kill these babies. So it's very, very commendable.
Absolutely, and it's horrifying. I know that Joe and Kamala have made it their platform essentially to murder babies. So
Yeah.
they're obviously putting their money where their mouth is, and even if they lost the Dobbs decision or they lost the Supreme Court, this is a workaround. So it's very important. I know we have lost a lot of people have lost faith in the elections, but this is why things like this are really really important. Going and voting in person is very extremely important. Um, Before you go, two things.
Yeah.
One, I want to just do a quick game that we call Patreon. It's kind of seems silly in the context of this interview or episode because we've talked
Oh,
about some pretty heavy
yeah.
things. But
Yeah,
um,
totally.
before we do that,
I'm
I
ready
just
for it.
but I do want to know. Yeah, we'll end it with that. Actually, that's a good call. What do you want your? I already know what your. To me, you've already are creating and living your legacy. But what do you want to be remembered for and as? Like, what do you want your legacy to be?
Ooh, wow. I've never been asked that before.
Mhm.
I guess I just want to be known as a guy who lived like he meant it, like lived like he actually believed what he said was true. If babies are being killed, I want everybody to say like that guy actually he gave his life for those babies. I guess that's what my legacy I want my legacy to be.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I figured that's what you would say, and you are already living that legacy. So you are doing
Thanks.
amazing things, and thank you for doing that. Okay, so you ready for like a little bit of fun?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do
Okay,
it.
let's try, and then we'll sign
Okay.
off because we covered a lot of. And hopefully we'll do this again because I'm hoping I'm seeing questions and comments on this already. And so I'm very excited to see the kind of conversation that we've generated with this really honest and kind of, just this very honest conversation. I hope you'll come back. But until then, let's do Patriot, Traitor, Pass. So it's basically that game like, oh, I would like to be friends with that person or not be friends with that person. Just do you think this person is a patriot, traitor, or do you prefer not to say?
Wait,
Okay?
hold on. So if they're a patriot, I want to be friends with them.
Well, I was trying to use a euphemism for the real game. It's like a drinking game that you used to play, and you'd be like, "Oh, I want to date that person. I want to marry that person."
I have water and coffee here. So
okay, yeah. Oh, I actually have this.
There you go. Oh, nice. The White Rose Resistance.
I always have this.
I want to talk about that real quick too.
And I love this. Talk about this.
So I work for the White Rose Resistance. We are the fastest growing pro-life organization in the country, led by one of my best friends, Seth Gruber. Man, I feel like it's my heart and my like passion to help Seth build and actually put feet to his fire. And so I'm wanting to build we talk about grassroots movements. I mean, we're already working on it, Nicole, like everything that you and I have been doing and everything God's been doing to wake up the church in America. But I really feel like something special is happening with the White Rose. And so I want everybody to be part of it. If you want to get involved with the pro-life movement, just come find me at the White Rose or in my personal platforms too. But we're going to be launching some pretty cool stuff in the next few months. Some Southern California resistance chapters, and some in Idaho and Texas also, and hopefully in the next few years all across America. We got some pretty crazy goals, some pretty very like generous goals of like reaching some crazy amounts of numbers and chapters. So I'm really excited to do that. But my goal is to use my body to cash the checks that Seth Gruber is writing with his speaking. So yeah, I'm going to be putting feet to his fire.
And you'll be educating people and like rallying people.
So
and
three things we're going to be doing. My goal is to build back Christian resistance. We're not going to be like every other pro-life movement that just talks and posts stuff online, or I shouldn't say every other pro-life movement. There's tons of great stuff that happens. But you know, like our role, I think, is raising up Christian resistance, a resurgence of Christian resistance, right? So like ending slavery. You had the Underground Railroad, which is like saving slaves from persecution, from slavery. That is like the love life, right? They're saving children, right? But we could have never ended slavery with just the Underground Railroad. We needed people to raise the status quo. We needed to raise social tension. We actually needed to shake up the places of power and change the entire nation. And so that's done through, I think, three things that I want the church to get involved with is we need to inform, we need to engage, and we need to enrage. So inform society of everything that's happening, engage public debate, kind of engage with people where they're at. And then we need to enrage every single place where evil is happening, every single place that gender mutilation is occurring, or where babies are being killed, or where Planned Parenthood fundraising galas are happening. We need to be there shaking up the places of child sacrifice and evil, and actually being an active resistance against evil everywhere it's happening. So
Well, I'm here for that. So
Yeah.
I will be.
I know you are.
I'm constantly enraged. And so I am all
You've been
about rising
too
up.
nice for too long. Yeah.
Okay. Well, please, as soon as everything, I repost, I share everything that you guys do. I think you and Seth and your whole team, you guys are amazing. What you speak is just the way that you guys are able to synthesize history and just truth and reality, which apparently seem to be different things, but they're not. It's very, very, very powerful and very effective. So
Praise God.
please keep doing what you're doing. Thank you to
will.
both of you. Please keep us posted. We will reshare everything. Make sure you hit those goals, those lofty goals. I know you will, because I see it growing right before my eyes. And before we go, we're going to do that Patriot Trader Pass.
Let's do it.
So you just let me know you think this person's a patriot, a traitor, or you want to pass because you don't want to be controversial, which I don't think that's you. But So what do you think, Bobby Kennedy Jr.? We talked about him earlier.
Oh, that's a hard one, because for the babies, he's a traitor.
Right. Okay.
Yep. For the vaccine stuff, he's a patriot.
Totally.
He's not a one size fits all. Yep.
I know. Donald Trump.
I mean, overall, he's a patriot. But to the babies, he's been kind of a traitor. Yeah.
Tucker Carlson.
Patriot.
Okay. Kanye West.
Ooh, pass.
Okay. James Lindsay.
We have a little bit of beef right now, but he's a patriot.
Alex Jones.
Patriot. 100% all the way.
Okay. Charlie Kirk.
Patriot.
Pope Francis.
Traitor.
Vivek Rams.
Patriot.
Vivek. Okay. Anybody else you want to mention in here? Any other patriots that you are, or a traitor you just want to call out before we sign off?
Patriot. I would say Edward Snowden. Patriot. Julian Assange. Traitor. I mean, the list goes on. Like,
sure, we got a lot of traitors in our midst.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, I really I'll stay for now.
I know. Let's end on a good note.
Yeah.
Well, I love you and your wife, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here.
We love you too.
This is a great. I appreciate your time. So thank you so much for sharing your information, for all the work that you do. And like I said, please do keep us posted. We want to support you. I am personally fighting, and I know the Facts, Law, Truth, Justice community. We appreciate you. We are fighting alongside you. We will be there. So just let us know how we can help you guys.
Awesome.
And I'll catch you. I'll see you on that hill.
All right. Talk to you soon. Thanks so much, Nicole. Appreciate it.
Bye, Jay. Yeah.